welcome to the start of a new reading vlog. I'm just making myself a cup of tea because I need the caffeine. Anyway, let me just grab the book. Guess where we're going? Back to my mum's room. You know why? Because it's really dark today and I need a bit of light. So this is the light that we're getting. Wow, I look so pale. How interesting. Anyway. Oh god. Hi! Welcome to the start of a new Women's Prize Longlist reading vlog. How exciting. I accidentally finished a book without updating you at all. So, oh my god, that's the bathroom. Let me just close the door. That's better. You don't need to see that. So in the last vlog, we read Cursed Bread, The Bandit Queen's Memphis, and something else that I don't remember. Oh, Homesick. And this vlog, we are going to be reading, well, I'm thinking, oh my god, I got all hair on my face. I'm thinking we're going to be reading Fire Rush, The Dog of the North, Wandering Souls, and if I can fit it, Stone Blind. But we'll see. We didn't fit it. I'm still reading Stone Blind, and that is the topic of the next episode. But, hi, welcome back. Let's do some reading. I started and finished Dog of the North yesterday by Elizabeth Mackenzie. How do I talk about this book? Okay, so what is it about? Let's procrastinate. I don't want to talk about my feelings. We have this woman named Penny Rush. She goes back to Santa Barbara, which is where her grandmother lives, and also I think where she grew up, because she's just separated from her husband. She like sold her car. She's just wanting to get away. And she also, there's like a few things happening behind the scenes as well with her grandmother, so she needs to organize a few things with her. She goes to Santa Barbara. She meets Bert, who is her grandmother's accountant, and they both kind of make this plan to help with the grandmother. And then things kind of go from there. Penny's parents had also disappeared like 5 years back in Australia, so you're dealing with like that grief as well because they're missing and you don't really know what happened to them, but it's been so long, do you just assume that they're dead? So you have that also happening. You have her grandmother, I'm pretty sure, has dementia, like the start of dementia, and she's not very nice to Penny and to people. Yep. There's also her grandfather dealing with him and his wife, who wants him to go into like a care facility. So there's a lot of things that are happening, and Penny is essentially responsible for everything. Her sister Margaret is actually in Australia, which doesn't really necessarily help Penny with anything because like Penny is just left by herself. And then it goes from there. Like that's basically the story. This makes it seem like it's this like fun, and it's not. You know why? Because it's boring. Okay? I can't really get into much about the story because honestly, it's not interesting and I don't want to talk about it. So, okay. Penny's grandmother Pincer from the outset is just like kind of not a villain, but you're supposed to not like her. And I was just struggling to figure out why. The grandmother is given no personality other than being an old lady who is getting dementia, who doesn't listen to the people around her, who has bodies buried in her backyard. Like it's strange. And I think it was supposed to be comedic, but it wasn't at all. That's the problem with this book, right? It tries really hard to be funny and it's not fucking funny. It's cringy. Okay, that's it. Why did my library put it in humor? It's not humorous. Wouldn't know humorous if a bit on the ass. Okay, so my issue with this was that it was boring. Penny as a narrator was boring, okay? And also, there's nothing like interesting happening. And you know me, I always say this, like I gave Cursed Bread like 4.5 stars. I am fine. I'm actually more than fine with a book that has no plot and just vibes. I love that. But the characters and the writing have to be good. No, at all. Nothing. Nope. So Penny has trauma, I'm pretty sure, from her past. Her and her sister have 2 different fathers. So her biological father, from what I understand, is mentally very unwell. And also, honestly, like emotionally and mentally abusive back in the day to Penny. And you could also argue like currently, because he tries to like essentially like stalk her to make sure like where it's really weird. But like no time is really given properly to any of these storylines. There are so many storylines that are happening that are given no attention. I wish that the focus was more on the exploration of grief and how hard it would be as children to deal with your missing parents, right? Because that's not, it's like maybe the last 100 pages, and it's just padded in this story of her grandmother, who again, we have no personality to this woman. She's given nothing. We know that she's a hoarder because that was like the first opening scenes. We know that she is kind of terrible. We briefly are given kind of like a mention by Penny that her mum, like Penny's mum, and like Penny herself and her sister never believed the stories that their grandmother Pincer would say about the grandfather Arlo, which I thought was strange. So like they're painting this woman as kind of a sociopath, but not really. But there's no real empathy given to this woman, and I really struggled to understand what the fucking point was. And also, what actually, do I have anything else to say about that? No, most likely not. I just didn't like it. The Dog of the North is the van that is Bert's, who is the grandmother's accountant. Now Bert has his own story, and Bert from the outset is very like welcoming and friendly towards Penny, and I think Penny latches onto that because Penny is very lonely. She struggles a lot with like social cues. I'm pretty sure she has a lot of anxiety, and social situations are kind of a trigger for her, but she latches onto Bert's friendship. Now Bert kind of goes through his own things, but Bert has a brother named Dale. Now whoever called this book romantic, let me just show you. Okay. It's a book review by both of us. Karen Joy Fowler called this book romantic. It's been blurbed on the front. I want to know the definition of romance that she's talking about, because it's definitely not my definition of romance. It's not romantic. Dale and... oh, I love him. Look at him. He's so cute. Should I just do this from here? Yeah. Do you like hearing me talk about Books Hunter? How can you still be tired? Last night you slept with me and pushed me out of the bed? Yeah. I don't know if you can see, but his ball is there. If I do my review just on his face, does that make it better? and not as harsh. Anyway, I'll do it like that so you can kind of see him. I didn't find this romantic, but I also didn't find this funny. Dale's character comes in after stuff happens with Bert. Bert has to go to the hospital because things have ruptured inside of him. Anyway, so Dale comes, and I think he's the younger brother of Bert. So he's had to take on a lot of responsibilities for Bert because Bert, back in the day, had kind of a nervous breakdown and hasn't ever been right since then, which, like, valid completely. So Dale comes. I don't know if it was meant to be romantic. Honestly, it just kind of felt very platonic, which makes sense because Penny just came out of a kind of horrible marriage, so it didn't feel romantic at all. I think we're meant to imply that Dale from the beginning was like interested, but maybe I just pretended not to see it because I was just so not enjoying this. I had to switch to the audiobook because physically reading this was kind of horrible. I'm not gonna lie. The writing for me, and I think this is what it comes down to, because if you enjoy this, I think I understand why you enjoy it. I think it's a book that a lot of people will enjoy, and I can see the merits in it. I think, you know, it takes things like not bad things, but like things that are happening that are stressful and overwhelming, and kind of tries to make it a bit more, not fun, but easily able to deal with, because there's like this underlying humor running through it. So I can understand why people enjoy it, and I think that's like one of the pros to this book. But for me, it was just the writing really failed it. I don't think the characters were interesting. The writing was so cringy. I can't explain it to you. I can't explain it, to be honest. But I have to say that the audiobook narrator did a wonderful job. That's like, she did such a fantastic job. I continued reading it because of the audiobook narrator. Like, she did so well. So I do recommend the audiobook if you want to read this. It was very good, but I just didn't like it. However, Pod is still the worst one as of right now. Like, this is just above Pod, because Pod's story was atrocious. This wasn't as bad. Okay, but it was still not very good. I think it's, for me, I didn't gel with the writing, and that just like ruined the entire book for me. I wanted more character work with the grandmother. She was this huge figure in the book, and we get nothing. And like, Penny is constantly talking. I feel as though I'm not being very like professional and articulate when I'm talking about this book, but Penny would constantly say like, oh, when her own daughter was, you know, missing, like when it was announced that she was missing, like she did nothing, like she didn't even mourn, or like her, like it was just, she was just so like not caring. And I'm like, do you think maybe that was the way that she could deal with it? Like, let's explore her story. Like, why is she so terrible to everyone? Like, is it just because she's this psychopath, or is it because she's had a hard life? Like, give me more. I want to know more about her, because you're painting her in this particular way. I just need to know. The grandmother was very two-dimensional. Not my cup of tea. Not my cup of tea. I wonder if it was Hunter's cup of tea. Did you enjoy the book, Hunter? It was this one. Yeah. I know. I don't think it was. I played the audiobook and he was sleeping on the bed, and he shit himself because of the... I did put it up quite high, didn't I, the volume? Apologise. Go to sleep. I'm sorry, go to sleep. It's okay. So that's my review for The Dog of the North by Elizabeth Mackenzie. I also wish that the dog itself, Bert's dog, was more of a character in this. But I did like at the end when Bert gives the Dog of the North to Penny as Bert dies, which is, again, did he have to die? I still didn't like the book, so I will now go return this book to the library because I don't want to ever see it again. So I just finished Wandering Souls by Cecile Pinn, and I'm gonna need some time just to like gather myself, but incredible. Yeah, okay. Oh my god, I haven't stopped crying. So I'm kind of ready to talk about Wandering Souls by Cecile Pinn. Actually, I feel like I'm not ready. I don't think I can articulate how wonderful this book was. And if you hear that noise in the background, it's the washing machine. This fucking washing machine. It's so loud. So, Wandering Souls. It is about a family who seek to find refuge in the States during the Vietnam War, just before the fall of Saigon. But on their way, something happens with the boat and most of the family dies, and a lot of people on board die. And then you have 3 siblings left. They find themselves eventually in a refugee camp in Hong Kong. So you have 3 siblings. The oldest is An. And then you have Min and Tan. Tan? I loved An. I thought she was an incredible character and also a wonderful sister. But it's also so interesting. Actually, no, I'm not going to talk about that yet because it's a bit too far in the future. So what you have is their journey, living in refugee camps in Hong Kong, and then eventually in the UK, and then eventually they are able to settle in the UK in a council estate, in a council apartment, and begin their lives. It's about having to live with guilt, grief, like constant grief, feeling as though you're unworthy to really be happy because, like, they were a family of 7 and only 3 survived. Like, it was heartbreaking. And this book is heartbreaking. Like, oh my god. I don't even have my journal here to like read out quotes, but I feel like, I will read out at least one quote. So that's the kind of overarching story. So the way that this book is structured, written, you have the narrative that is mostly An, but sometimes Min, and sometimes Tan, but it's mostly An. And then you also have these entries that look like you can tell they're different, that look like this. Kind of like a typewriter-esque situation. Now that is from a woman who is writing this story, basically. She's the one putting all this together. And so you read what she's thinking, you read her journey in creating this, you also read her journey with intergenerational trauma and finding out what that is. It's wonderful. Eventually you do find out who that woman is. It's also with like historical artifacts, like letters from Margaret Thatcher, journal articles from back in the day that talk about a certain event from the Vietnam War or from the aftermath of so many people seeking refuge, like refugees seeking refuge and asylum. You also have this character who is a sibling but who is not alive, who is just like watching over them, and his name is Dao, and he made me cry the most. And when it took me a bit I feel like I should have realized more quickly than I actually did, but I was just reading, I was just having a good time. and then it clicked. I was like, wait, what? He's literally a wandering soul. And if you read the book, you understand not only the kind of cultural connotation to the idea of like the wandering soul, but also its connotations with the Vietnam War, because it was a propaganda operation by the US against Viet Cong troops and just like Vietnamese people. So it was just like heartbreaking but so beautiful, and I loved it. And I just want to read out a quote from Dao's perspective. "I am invisible and voiceless, floating around until a snippet of conversation catches my ear, and like a spy, I go and listen in secret. I cannot stay still, and I cannot rest. I cannot sit or lie down." When it comes to the point in the story when An, Min and Tan can finally do like the proper kind of funeral arrangements for their family, that chapter when Dao says, "I can finally rest," I was sobbing. I can't tell you how much this book shattered bits of my heart, but it's also a really gorgeous story of hope. An's love is just so all-encompassing for her brothers. She became she's not only a sister, but she became the parental figure for her brothers. But she makes a decision in the beginning that most likely altered their story, and she grapples with that guilt of wondering whether it altered for the better or for the worst. And that also killed me, because all she wanted was the best for her brothers, but she was also a girl, like 16, 17, mourning the loss of her parents and her family and needing someone to blame. And for her, it was her uncle who helped her father kind of create this plan of going to the US. So I don't know what else to say other than I need to own this book. I already told my mum that she needs to read it. I think Cecile Pin, is this her debut? If it's her debut, I am so excited to see what she writes next. She wrote so beautifully, and I wonder if the character who is who's actually writing, you know, the story, a story within a story, is based a little bit on her experiences with writing this novel, if that makes sense. I don't know. It was beautiful. I could not look away. I had to read this in one go. Like, I finished it in one day. I could not read it. I wanted to see what happened, and I think it was a beautifully rendered story and very, very sad, but with this underlying sense of hope. But I honestly, for like the last maybe 50 pages, 70 pages, couldn't stop crying. I was just, you saw me in the aftermath. I was worse off. I had cleaned myself a little bit. Like, it was deeply moving and very wonderful. And I'm so happy that I read it. I feel like I had so much more to say, but I am kind of reeling from the reading experience of this. Beautiful, beautiful. I gave this 5 stars because obviously cannot recommend this enough. Cannot recommend this enough. And also, Ocean Vuong blurbed this. He can do no wrong. Like, I love his work. So yeah, this is fantastic, wonderful, a masterpiece. And I think the next book that I'm going to be reading will be Fire Rush by Jacqueline Crooks, because technically I'm in the middle of reading. I started reading it a few days ago, but I just randomly picked this up. Can you see that I'm kind of gobsmacked? I don't know how to talk about my feelings. for this book. I think the added perspectives of like Dao and of the woman who is writing this story and putting it together made this book so much more deeply affecting, because you saw, especially with the writer, the generational aspect, hint hint nudge nudge, but also with Dao you saw this like really beautiful cultural, like religious aspect as well, because Dao is with his family in the afterlife looking over the rest of their siblings. And I just think that is the most precious thing in the entire world, and it just added something more to it. And like as the reader you're like, this is what the family wanted for them, and like that just, it's the love. Oh my god, read Wandering Souls. At this point in time, okay, I have, how many books have I read? I have no idea. At least over half. At this point in time, if you want to read any books from the long list for the Women's Prize, read Wandering Souls. That's what I'm gonna say. Out of the books that I have read, if you want a recommendation, read Wandering Souls. If you just want to like quickly read one of the best books on this long list, this is definitely one of the best books on this long list, and I really hope it gets on the short list. I hope that every other book now is just fantastic as well. Are you ready, Hunter? You have to see this. My dog is so strong. Okay. Okay. Are you ready? Ready? And pull. I am not the lightest of people. That was fun. That was fun. Da, 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 da. My dog is waiting for me to take him for a drive. Can you see him right there? I told him I have to film this first and then we can go. But he's very, very pushy. Hi everyone. So this, I accidentally forgot to update you earlier than this point for this particular book. For some reason I thought that I did at like the 150 mark, but I looked and I didn't. Anyway, I'm here to talk about Fire Rush by Jacqueline Crooks. So I finished this. This took me over a week to read, and it's not because the book is bad. The book is incredible. It's because it's very heavy, and I don't know, I was just at night really tired, didn't really want to pick it up. But this is what we're talking about today. So Fire Rush is, God, an emotional ride. It is emotional, it is gripping, it is, I don't know what else to say. I kind of feel like I've got a bit of a book hangover after reading this. So it's about this young woman, she's in her late 20s, her name is Yamaye. She's my favorite character in this. She's just, Jacqueline Crooks really took the time to ensure that we knew her. You know, she is such a full, like, rounded character that I feel like I know her. I feel like I know every, like, part about her, her fears, her flaws, the parts of her that, you know, are wonderful. I just think that Jacqueline Crooks did such a great character with Yamaye. So it's about Yamaye and just her existing as a, you know, black woman in the UK, I'm pretty sure. Yep, in the UK. I don't know why my brain kind of went a bit weird with that. But in the UK, doing what people in their, you know, 20s do, go out clubbing, being part of the community. You know, dub and music is such a huge part of this book. So you are oh my god. You are immediately placed in Yamaye's world with the kind of importance of music and dub music and community. And so you see her at the crypt, which is literally like what it sounds like, but it's being used as this kind of club for dub for the community, because a lot of black people from the Caribbean, from Jamaica, is Jamaica in the Caribbean? How embarrassing. Are all in here, like they're all kind of like come together, and the crypt is really kind of the center of their community, which makes sense because music is so important. And then you have a collection of other characters, but they're not really important. It's Yamaye, and she is still growing, she's still coming into herself. She then meets a man, name is Moose, and from there things kind of go downhill, especially not because of Moose, but in the aftermath of his death. Now, Moose is murdered by the police. Now, the police in this are called Babylon, which I thought was just very on the nose. I don't know, I just really loved, because it felt like, I don't know how to explain it properly, but referencing the police as Babylon, it kind of made it feel like this like empire, this kind of, I think it's described in the book as a superstructure, and I'm pretty sure it's actually, yeah, I put it here, let me have a look. Babylon is no joke, superstructure, slave ship. So it's like the institutional, you know, oppression, the violence, but also this kind of like assumption of Babylon, this like empiric figure, this organization with its like warriors, being the police, kind of have like this assumption that they are allowed to put their hands on black bodies. I just think that Jacqueline Crooks really not enjoyed, but like understood why that was the case, why it was referenced in that way. I just think it added more like this image, you know what I mean, of like this all-encompassing watching you can't do anything without them knowing. Like that was just what it felt like. Moose is killed, is murdered by the police, and Yamaye just obviously doesn't handle it very well, because that's the love of her life, and she gets into it with a man later on, and a group of men who, you know, as the reader are very bad news, because also as the reader you see the foreshadowing. Jacqueline Crooks did really well in the foreshadowing, I have to admit. For instance, page 149. I tell myself that a refuge is a refuge no matter how dark it is. It gets really dark, okay? And that is the foreshadowing to what was to come. But yeah, so as the reader, we know that it's going to be a really bad decision. And Yamaye knows in her gut. Like, she knows. Like, with that quote, like, she kind of knows, right? But then it does get bad, and she gets involved in a crowd that she just, there's this realization, at this point of realization where she's like, oh my god, I don't think I'll be able to get out ever. But she does, and she goes to Jamaica because she wants to find her mum. And there's this plot happening, kind of overarching plot. So her relationship with her father is not the best. Her father, Irving, is very closed off. Yamaye constantly kind of mentions, and it's really sad because it just emphasizes her loneliness, but like this bone deep loneliness. How, you know, her father doesn't love her, and why is she waiting around for that moment when he will finally love her? But not only that, Irving was abusive. And then she finds out that Irving was actually abusive to her mother. Now, she's always been told that her mother died on a kind of, what's it called? It's not a mission trip, but she was a nurse and she went back to Jamaica and to help in like a very rural village. The only way to get in or out was like through one river. And she was told, Yamiye was told that her mother died there, but she actually found out from her dad later on in the book, and like I'm talking later on in the book, right, that no, she didn't actually, well, no one actually knows if she died. She disappeared. And so Yamiye is like, hang on a minute, so is there a possibility that she's alive? And Irving, who is the father, said, well, I just assumed she died because she wouldn't have left you here. Like, she would have wanted to bring you with her. And she was kind of making plans for that. She was trying to leave him, which that's interesting because you see that's a very similar cycle between Yamiye's mum and her father Irving, with Yamiye and a man named Manasa, who is the man that she connects with in the aftermath of Moose's death, who is not great for her. And just like, he's not great. And he's in a crowd that is kind of, I don't know, like connected with unsavory people. So you see that cycle happening again. And in a way though, Yamiye really is able to connect a bit further with her mum. And Yamiye kind of does think that her mother is dead because she feels her spirit. Now, this is something that I fucking loved about Fire Rush. The way that Jacqueline Crooks so seamlessly blends the spiritual and like this idea of the afterlife, of like something kind of magical and not fantastical, but like kind of, you know, we're talking about spirits, we're talking about ghosts, but we're also talking about kind of the land and the magic and the memories of the land and of the sea and ancestors, and how music kind of connects us all through past, you know, present and future. And the way that that is written is so amazing. I actually wrote a note down because Yamiye throughout the book connects with her mother. She feels her mother. Her mother is like right in front of her face. They connect through music. Yamiye is a singer. She is an artist. She writes her own lyrics. She sings and she has a wonderful voice. And through her voice, literally through her voice, she's able to empower herself and she finds the strength to do what she needs to do. But she also is able to connect so much with her mother that her mother kind of sings through her. And you have these kind of scenes where that happens, and it is the most beautiful, beautiful scenes, those moments, because it's just like, it's sad, but there's a beauty in the sadness because Yamiye is just like connecting with her mum. And then when Yamiye goes back to Jamaica, she feels her mother's presence so much more clearly that she kind of is just like, she's in the afterlife. She is here with me. She is guiding me. And those moments, dude, it got me. It got me. I may have gotten a bit emotional, but honestly, I'm always emotional when I read. Because I'm just like such an easy person to make cry, as I say, or the bloody time. But yes, so there was this kind of going on that point of like this really beautifully conveyed connection between Yamiye and her mother. When her father falls ill, she kind of goes back to him because she left the town that she grew up in because it was getting a bit heated. The police were stalking her because they wanted to find more information, but also maybe pin something on her. I got that implication, and Babylon was kind of going through it as a result of Moose's murder because it was getting a lot of attention, and there were a lot of protests and riots to obviously protest the fucking treatment of the police against Moose and against black people. And so because she was, you know, Moose's girlfriend, she was kind of getting a bit unwanted attention, but she was also getting unwanted attention from part of her community because her best friend Asase murdered someone. I will get to that in a second, but let me just talk about this particular moment to emphasize how beautiful this connection was between Yamaye and her mother. Even though like her mother was dead, well, we assume her mother is dead, she's still very much a character in this. So it's a tipping point when Yamaye goes back to her hometown, goes back to Irving. She actually sees her one of her mother's best friends, who's also Asase's mother. Now, never before had Yamaye ever been told things about her mother. So she found out a few things, namely that Irving used to abuse her, physically abuse her. And when she found that out, I literally wrote a tipping point, a catalyst, and it was. And you have this really freaking gorgeous moment when the mother says to, when I say says, you know, she feels it, she can hear her mother in her mind, she can feel her mother. Her mother's just like, I want to sing, like I want to go, I want to sing, I want to be free, essentially. And Yamaye says to her out loud, but also to herself, we will. And I am not lying to you, I got a bit teary-eyed because I just, there's like coalescing of these two. I don't know, it was just so beautifully written. Like Jacqueline Crooks' writing, incredible. I'll also get to that later. And then also going on that note is the weaving of history throughout this. Now, so I don't know much, unfortunately. I'm gonna need to read more about this because it's just unfortunately been something that I never really taught about, and I just need to make that proactive measure and start really looking into it. I don't know much about the slave trade in the UK, don't know much about it. I didn't know much about the sugar trade as well. I read Reamble by Priya Hine, which also like talks about that legacy and the violence. And so I don't know much about the slave trade in the UK. I feel like a lot of people just assume that it didn't really exist, but it fucking existed. And so throughout the story, you get these just moments when Yamaye like not realizes, but is just conveying how closely connected past and present is. And so she'd be doing something and it'll be like, you know, I can feel, you know, I wonder how the women and the men and the children who, you know, came to this place on a ship, how they were feeling, what they were doing. And you have these, they're always like, they're almost seamlessly interwoven, so you kind of get this sense of like past and present, like there's not such thing as such a clear binary between the two, because like the past is in the present, it's not in the past, like there's no such thing. Does that make sense? I'm saying like history, like the term history makes it seem as though it was so far into the past that it doesn't have any connection whatsoever into the future. But Yamaye and her story and the way that Jacqueline Crooks writes this is like, no, the fact that it happened in the past, in history, and we're being told that, oh, historically this is what happened, it doesn't mean that the effects aren't being felt right now. There's such a thing called intergenerational trauma. There's such a thing as the legacy of something. But also that term a legacy implies past, that there's no touching of the past onto the present, but that's not the case. Okay? That is not the case. That is not happening. It's very much constantly being felt in the present. It is constantly being part of the reality of the fabric of Black people in the UK, talking specifically of this book, like they are constantly living with that every day. And Jacqueline Crooks writes this in, I feel like I'm getting really like heated, but Jacqueline Crooks did this so freaking well, and you're just like, you just get kind of angry. You're like, fuck white people, fuck the UK, fuck the empire, just like fuck everything. And like you're just feeling it. And Yamae feels that as well. She kind of gets this fire, get it? This fire rush. Yeah, anyway, it's just wonderful. That was wonderful. Do I have any examples of that? I feel like I do. I also say here that there's like a blurring of past and present, which I think I kind of just conveyed to you. But this is one of the very few moments that Manasa actually says something. He does say things throughout the book that you're like, I understand. But he's also kind of horrible to Yamae. So Manasa to Yamae says, they didn't just uproot our bodies. They uprooted our forests, our rivers, our seas and seeds. Reparation is needed so we can replant ourselves. Like some of these, I wrote so many quotes down. I think the most that I've written for any of the books that I've read for this, because it's just so beautiful. So now I'll go on to, this is a very long clip, I apologize. I'm gonna start getting a bit quicker. The writing in this. This was great. The writing, but however, the writing takes you a bit to get into because it's very rhythmic. The language is used not only to convey the story, which is the point, but also to convey culture, community, what I've been talking about of like of past and present blurring, of the spirituality and the magic of what Yamae is going through, of Yamae's kind of history or like her ancestors, and just the community as a whole. Language is used. It is very important to the story. If you've read Glory, it's kind of similar in the sense that it's written in the way that the people are talking. So it took me a bit just to get into it because it is very much kind of a rhythm. There's a groove to it and you get into it, and once you get into it, I binge read the last like over half yesterday because I was just like, yes, you know. So the first 100 pages, 150 pages can take a bit to get into. Well, that was just me, but also don't forget my mood plays a part in this. So the writing is very beautiful. It is very, very important to the story as a whole and to Yamae as a character. We then have music, dub specifically. So I'm just going to give you a quote from the book that is going to perfectly summarize the importance of dub and music and rhythm and movement. This is from page 299, so very close to the end. I tell them that right now I'm focused on finding out what I can about Mama. Whatever time is left is for music. We talk about dub and its roots in slave uprisings, sacred rhythm breaking time, reappropriating history, communicating stories of resistance. That is literally the book, the point, the importance, everything, just in that quote. Jacqueline Crooks was able to write so much in such a small amount. I really do think that if you have access to the audiobook for Fire Rush, do it. I don't have access to the audiobook, could not find it anywhere, and I did not want to go to Audible. Like, I didn't want to pay for it. I was trying to see if I could find it on Libby, at my library, on Scribd, but I couldn't. I think the audiobook would have been, or would be, is brilliant, because Yamae is a singer, she's an artist, and dub and music is so important. And there are parts of, you know, chapters where it's like her singing or her lyrics or just music in general. That would have been so beautiful to listen to, and I think just the way that this book is written would have lent itself so perfectly to an audiobook. So if you want to read Fire Rush, highly recommend trying the audiobook. I just feel as though it would have been great because I've also heard really good things about it. I have heard that the audiobook is fantastic. Now let's talk a little bit about things that I want to criticize a little bit. I think, am I moving on now to, yeah, let's just go a little bit to the like criticisms, and these are very nitpicky. Asase. So Asase, I hope I'm saying her name right, is Yamie's best friend, one of her best friends. And from the outset, we're really only given a little bit about her. She's kind of toxic, and that's really all we know of her. Like, time is spent kind of being like, she's had a hard life, but that's really it. Like, that's where it stops. Now, the way that Asase is, you either, like, it's like a love-hate thing. So you love her, but you also can't stand the side of her. And so my issue with Asase was that she was just not really a fully rounded character, which was just so strange when you compared her to Yamie. But obviously Yamie is the main character, but I do think that one of the like flaws of the book, and also I'm a reviewer, disclaimer, reviewer, random reviewer on the internet, what do I know, but a lot of the side characters are not really given much meat, which like I understand because it is Yamie's story, but like even people who are so pivotal to her story are not really given much time at all to develop, or we don't really know much about them. So Asase is one of those characters, and so because Asase and Yamie are best friends, kind of, she's always there. But then she randomly, there's this moment when she and like Yamie and her other friend Ruma, but it's mostly Asase, gets assaulted by this man called Crabman. We find out later he is actually an informant to the police. And after that, Yamie knew that Asase was like not right, because like traumatized. And Yamie is like, Asase, like, let's go, we need to go, like, let's go to a doctor, like, you've been, like, this just happened and it's been shocking and you're most likely hurt. And Asase is like, no, I'm fine, like, let's just go back to the crypt, let's go to the club. And so they do. But then Asase murders a man whose name, Eustace, pretty sure it's Eustace. He is a very big figure in the community. He owns a Dub Steps, I think it's called. It's like a record store. And he is one of those, you know, pillars of the community. He helps young people. He's very much a very important man. And Asase kills him. You find out that Asase was trying to get him to cheat on his wife with her because Asase was feeling things for him. And so when he clearly says to her, no, I'm married, I'm not going to cheat on my wife, but even if I would, I wouldn't with you because you're like my daughter. She stabs him. But you understand as the reader, and I think also Yamie understands this as well, that she was reacting because she was literally just traumatized by what happened, because it was a very horrible situation. But then, like, you're not given anything else. Like, Asase was so, like, you're told that they literally grew up together, that Asase's mother mothered, essentially, Yamie. But Asase is given no thought. There's nothing to her character. And I'm just like, come on, what? Nothing at all? No. And I do understand that Yamie realized that she needed to cut Asase off, that the friendship was just toxic. But I wish we had more character development. I wish we had more, just not even character development, just to flesh her out more, make her a bit more well-rounded, especially with the other friend Ruma, who just like leaves. After Asase gets arrested, so Ruma was in love with Asase. Ruma's just like, I'm out of this, like I can't, I'm going back to Ireland. And then just re-emphasizing like Yamie is alone and her loneliness. But what was the point? Really annoyed me. And then we're gonna get to Moose. I loved Moose, but we don't really spend a lot of time with Moose. Now, I don't know if that was deliberate or if it was edited down, but there's a lot of time skips, and because I'm me, I got really confused with how long time, like how much time had passed. Like, was it a few months? Was it a year? In my head, it's been only like 3 or 4 months that they were actually together. But because of the time skips and the time jumps, I felt like I didn't really know Moose, which was really, really sad, because Moose and Yamie together were beautiful, but there wasn't enough time with them. And so I feel like maybe that could have been a deliberate decision, just to be like how, not only how time flies, but also things can happen so quickly that you don't know when it's your end, especially being like a black person, especially like a black man in the UK. So that could have been the point of that, but I think it did a little bit of a disservice to Moose himself and to their relationship, because as the reader I was like, do I believe this? Like, I do, but what? It happened so quickly. And then let's talk about Manasan. Now, I understand, obviously, Yamie was grieving in mourning, and so she latched onto Manasa, sorry. Why am I saying Manasa? Cool name, by the way. So he, trigger warnings, but there is sexual violence, and he words her. And it's a really horrible, it's not even, I'm not going to call it a relationship because it wasn't, but he had a hold on her, and so she stayed because of fear, which that entire period was very harrowing to read. And I kind of wish that less time was spent there and more time was spent in Jamaica. So by the time Yamie goes to Jamaica, the book is nearly finished. And then Manasa comes out of jail and finds her in Jamaica. I'm just like, it just felt really rushed. And I felt as though it had been like edited down and down and down. I would have read this book if it was like 500 pages. I just wanted more of Yamie in Jamaica, more of her being happy and not having to deal with this man who was just constantly traumatizing her, and her having to deal with that. So that really frustrated me. But also I just wanted a happy ending. And I think like the ending itself was good. Like, he got his just desserts, but I also just wanted I wanted an epilogue. That's what I wanted. Give me an epilogue. Give me her living her best fucking life, because she deserves that. But I liked how she never, like, you don't really find out any more about her mum, even though she goes to Jamaica for the sole purpose of finding out information about her mum. It's kind of left open-ended, and I think that really worked well for it. I think that was a really good way of dealing with that part of the story. Why? Because it added to that layer of kind of magic, of that spiritual aspect to it, and her just knowing that her mum will always be there with her. And I think that was really beautiful. And same with Moose. That was really beautiful. But yeah, good book. If you didn't realize that. I do think that my mood did a disservice to this, like the beginning of my reading experience with this book, but I binge read like most of it yesterday. So it's very fast paced, very propulsive, if that's a word that I could use in that context. But I'm happy that I read it, and I will definitely be reading more of Jacqueline Crooks in the future. I mean, definitely. The way that she writes, god damn it, absolutely fantastic. That's one book done. Another book done! How exciting!